April 24th, 1980. 8 RH-53D Sea Stallions lift off the USS Nimitz, CVN-68, into the Iranian night. The mission: penetrate 600 miles into hostile territory and pull 52 American hostages out of Tehran. A haboob killed it before it started. That wall of sand choked sensors, cracked rotor blade indicators, and systematically dismantled the operation helicopter by helicopter. By Desert 1, only 5 aircraft were functional. The minimum was 6. The abort order came down. Then, an RH-53D collided with an EC-130E on the ground. 8 Americans died on Iranian soil. USS Coral Sea, CV-43, sat on standby that entire night and never launched a single aircraft in anger. The hostages remained in captivity 264 more days. The Pentagon absorbed the failure and asked one hard question: if we ever go back, what exactly do we bring? That answer became the most powerful naval force ever assembled. And if you want to understand every platform, every weapon, every doctrine built in response to that night, subscribe now. Every detail is coming. The Persian Gulf is not a forgiving operating environment. It's shallow, averaging just 164 feet of depth, geographically constrained, and acoustically complex. Iran understood this long before American planners did, and built an asymmetric toolkit specifically designed to exploit it. Start with the mines. Iran's SADAF-02 influence mines sit on the seafloor and wait. They don't care how sophisticated your destroyer is. They care about your hull's acoustic and magnetic signature, and they detonate accordingly. Then there's the submarine threat. Iran operates Russian-built Kilo-class boats. Their designation: Turret class. Submariners call them black holes. Diesel-electric propulsion means they run nearly silent in the Gulf's already acoustically cluttered shallow water, making passive sonar detection brutally difficult. You need an airborne platform operating above the noise floor to hunt them effectively. Inland, the problem changes entirely. Fordow is buried under a mountain. Natanz sits behind tens of feet of reinforced concrete. Conventional strike aircraft cannot carry the munition required to reach those facilities. Only one aircraft in the American inventory can, and we'll get to it. Finally, the littoral zones. An Arleigh Burke draws 31 feet of water. Iran's coastal corridors don't give you 31 feet. The Independence-class LCS drafts 14 feet and tops 44 knots. It goes where destroyers simply cannot. The doctrine was clear. Now let's talk about the machines built to execute it. Platform by platform, specification by specification. Let's go platform by platform. Strike Aviation. The Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, is not simply a newer Nimitz. It's a generational leap. The Ford generates 160 sorties per day under routine operations, 270 during surge, a 33% increase over the Nimitz class. That difference comes down to 2 systems. Emails. The electromagnetic aircraft launch system replaces steam catapults with precisely tuned electromagnetic energy. A steam catapult had one brutal setting. Emails adjust its launch profile for every aircraft on the deck, from a light surveillance drone to a fully loaded F-35C, without stressing the airframe. Pair that with the advanced weapons elevators, electromagnetic motors replacing hydraulic cables below deck, and the Ford rearms faster than any carrier in history. Deep Strike. The B-2 Spirit carries one weapon that no other aircraft on Earth can deliver: the GBU-57A/B, Massive Ordnance Penetrator. 30,000 pounds. Released from above 30,000 feet, it reaches near supersonic velocity before impact, boring through 60 feet of reinforced concrete or 200 feet of earth before a smart fuse times the detonation of its 5,300-pound high-explosive payload. It was designed with 2 specific addresses in mind: Fordow and Natanz. Surface combatants. The Arleigh Burke Flight 3 destroyer, USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., DDG-121, carries the AN/SPY-6V1 air and missile defense radar. It is 30 times more sensitive than the SPY-1D on earlier flight variants, and simultaneously tracks both ballistic and cruise missile threats. USS Winston S. Churchill runs the Mark 45 Mod 4, a 5-inch, .62 caliber gun with a longer barrel than previous models, producing greater muzzle velocity and extended engagement range. Subsurface. USS Florida, SSGN 728, was converted from a nuclear ballistic missile submarine into a guided missile platform carrying 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. 2 forward tubes were reconfigured as lockout chambers for 66 Navy SEALs. A 30-ton dry deck shelter supports submersible operations, ISR, and networking. The P-8A Poseidon hunts Iran's Kilo-class submarines from altitude using sonobuoy arrays and magnetic anomaly detection. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye's AN/APY-9 radar operates in the UHF band, wavelengths that physically resonate with stealth aircraft dimensions, rendering radar-absorbing coatings largely irrelevant. Logistics. USNS Arctic Tow 8 sustains the entire force. It matches carrier speed at 30 knots, enabling underway replenishment inside high-threat zones without the battle group slowing down. Those are the specifications on paper, but paper doesn't tell you what happened when these systems, and their crews, actually went to war. 8 years after Desert One, the U.S. military got its answer. Eagle Claw had exposed a joint force without integration, without redundancy, and without a dedicated special operations infrastructure. What followed was 8 years of institutional rebuilding. By April 1988, the Navy was ready to demonstrate exactly what that rebuilding had produced. On April 14th, USS Samuel B. Roberts, FFG-58, struck an Iranian SADAF-02 influence mine in the Central Gulf. The explosion tore a 15-foot hole in her hull and broke her keel. By any structural assessment, that ship should have gone to the bottom. She didn't. Commander Paul Rinn and his crew fought flooding and fire with a discipline that became a permanent chapter in Navy damage control doctrine. The Roberts survived. 4 days later, the United States Navy responded. Operation Praying Mantis, April 18, 1988, remains the largest U.S. surface engagement since the Second World War. The Iranian missile boat Joshan made the first move, firing a harpoon at USS Wainwright. The missile was defeated. What came back was not. USS Simpson, FFG-56, fired Standard missiles in surface-to-surface mode, a non-doctrinal employment that her crew executed precisely. Combined with sustained 5-inch gunfire, the Joshan sank. In doing so, USS Simpson became the last modern American warship to sink an enemy vessel in combat, a distinction she still holds. Simultaneously, a 6E Intruders launched from USS Enterprise, CVN-65, found the Iranian frigate Sabalon. Crew accounts describe the laser-guided bombs going straight down the smokestack. The Sabalon was mission-killed and had to be towed to port. Her sister ship, the Sahand, was not as fortunate. She went down completely. Multiple Iranian oil platforms were destroyed. U.S. combat deaths? 0. The score in a single day. 2 Iranian warships destroyed, 1 crippled. The Gulf's balance of power fundamentally shifted. Fast forward to the modern era. USS Florida, SSGN 728, returned in 2023 from a 727-day deployment, covering 60,000 miles. The same hull that once carried nuclear ballistic missiles. In January 2026, she fired Tomahawk land attack missiles at Houthi targets, proxy infrastructure directly connected to Iranian operational planning. The weapon changed. The address didn't. Meanwhile, Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group crews absorbed deployment extensions that kept some sailors at sea for nearly a year without returning home. That is the unglamorous arithmetic of persistent deterrence. And the E-2D Hawkeye sitting above the battle group makes it operationally viable. That aircraft doesn't just detect threats. It cues SM-6s and Tomahawks fired from destroyers sitting below the radar horizon, keeping the shooters entirely outside the enemy's engagement envelope. Praying Mantis didn't just sink Iranian ships, it rewrote how the U.S. Navy understood surface warfare and set the template for everything that followed. Every platform in this video exists because of a specific failure, a specific lesson, or a specific threat. Eagle Claw's collapse in 1980 didn't just end a mission, it ended an era of ad hoc joint operations. 7 years later, the Goldwater-Nichols Act and the establishment of U.S. Special Operations Command formalized what Desert One had made undeniable. Integrated command structure isn't administrative preference, it's a combat requirement. Praying Mantis hardened everything else. The Roberts taught the Navy that damage control culture saves ships that physics says should sink. The Joshan engagement proved that doctrinal flexibility, firing a standard missile in surface-to-surface mode, wins engagements that rigid thinking loses. Distributed lethality, layered defense, crew training as a force multiplier, those lessons are now foundational. Then, consider the name on DDG-121's hull, Lieutenant General Frank E. Peterson, Jr., the first African-American Marine aviator and general officer. The Navy called him Gray Eagle as the senior-ranking aviator across the entire naval service. His name doesn't appear on just any destroyer. It appears on the ship carrying the most capable radar system ever deployed at sea. That is not coincidence. That is a statement about who built this force and who continues to serve in it. And today, the Ford, the E-2D, DDG-121, and the Florida are not individual platforms. They are nodes in a single kill network. Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air means an E-2D orbiting 200 miles from a target can guide a missile fired from a destroyer sitting below the radar horizon. No single hull is the weapon. The network is the weapon. If that kind of depth is what you come here for, the doctrine, the history, the names behind the hardware, subscribe right now. This is the channel that doesn't skip the details that matter. From 8 helicopters lost in a sandstorm to a submarine that can launch 154 cruise missiles from the deep, the U.S. military's engagement with Iran is not a series of incidents. It's a 45-year conversation conducted in steel and fire.